Alright, in today's video I wanted to talk about the classic video arcade game Wizard of Wor, and I wanted to do a compare and contrast between three of the console versions. The Intellivision version, which was a modern homebrew, and Wizard of Wor was not released on the Intellivision initial 125 games list, but it did come out, I believe, around 2019 or /20. And then also Wizard of Wor Arcade for the Atari 2600. Now, Wizard of Wor was released on the Atari 2600, a pathetic version of it in the early 80s, but this remake here, also a homebrew by John Champeau and Champ Games, was released, I believe, in either 2019 or 2020. And then I also want to talk about Wizard of Wor for the Commodore 64. Now, this game was released in 1982, and in my opinion, it stands up to both of these games. One of the reasons why I chose Wizard of Wor as one of the games to do a compare and contrast video on is because this game has speech synthesis. Now, a lot of the games back in the day, in the early 80s, did not support speech synthesis initially out of the box. You had to buy some kind of a hardware device. And the Intellivision and the Atari 2600 are no exception to that rule, as well as the Commodore 64. It did not have speech synthesis out of the box. So in order to enable speech synthesis, you need a device like this. For the Intellivision, they released the Intellivoice. The Intellivoice was released in 1982, and it only had a 2-year lifespan from 82 and 83. It didn't sell a whole lot of units, and part of the reason for that, back in 1982, this was $100, which in today's money, it equates to over $327. And so that's one of the reasons that contributed to this device not being so successful for the time. Again, had this been included with the Intellivision, or if had it been significantly cheaper, I think we could have saw much more of these sold and a much higher adoption rate with the software. This device plugs into the cartridge port, and then you then plug in a cartridge into the cartridge port in order to enable voice synthesis on voice-enabled games. This thing did not sell as well, and I think it's because of the price. If it was like $19.99, I think it would have sold a lot more, and there weren't a lot of games that supported or had voice when this thing first released. And it's a little clunky. The size of it is pretty big. But one of the advantages that this device has over the other two I'm going to be talking about was that you plug this into your Intellivision and you don't have to worry about plugging in any audio cables. This generates the voice directly out of the system, and so you don't have to do any finagling of cables or anything. So that's a nice feature. It does have this little volume switch here, which is also nice. You can control the volume of the output. And then the next device I wanted to discuss is for the Atari 2600, and this is a modern device. It's called the Atarivox Plus. It was released, I believe, in 2004 as just the Atarivox. And how this works is it has a 9-pin connector, and it plugs into your right controller port. And so it plugs right into there, and you plug in an audio cable into here. You have to plug speakers into this in order to hear the speech synthesis. The other advantage of this device, being that it's more modern, it has a couple of extra features, and one of those is it has 32K of memory, so you can save your high scores on here. You can save game settings. A lot of the games that John Champeau puts out save your settings even in the menu. Say you like to play a game in standard mode all the time. Well, it will remember, on John's games will remember that you normally play in standard mode, and the next time you power on your Atari, it will go to standard mode as a default. This device is also compatible with the Vectrex system. Alright, the next device I wanted to talk to you about is the Magic Voice, produced by Commodore way back in 1984. In order to get speech synthesis for Wizard of Wor, you simply plug in this unit into your Commodore 64 cartridge port, and then you plug the cartridge into the device like this. This device also has input and output jacks for audio right here. So you do have to worry about how you're going to go about getting the audio on your system. So it becomes a little bit of a wiring mess when you have to plug in cables here. It's unfortunate that they had to do it this way. The device came out in 1984 and it sold for about $60, which today equates to $182, which made it quite expensive. It never gained popularity and is nowadays considered rare. It's not something you can pick up easily. You can find it, but you're gonna have to dig around to find something like this. One of the reasons that it's so rare is probably because there were only 3 games ever designed to utilize the device. And those games are the learning program, ABCs, Gorf, and the topic of this video, Wizard of Wor. The Magic Voice device has a few more features I could talk about. With the device plugged into the cartridge port by itself, it enabled basic programs and assembly language to utilize speech synthesis by doing simple commands such as the keyword say followed by the word or a number. It has a built-in vocabulary of 235 utterances, as the manual puts it. And if you would like to learn more about this device, Robin over at 8-Bit Show and Tell did an in-depth video over on his channel. And finally, I want to point out that this was not the only device or software for the Commodore 64 that enabled speech synthesis. In fact, the one I remember most was called SAM, Software Automated Mouth, and it was really fun to play around with. Now I want to discuss the packaging that these games came in. First off, I'm going to look at the Intellivision. Again, this was released around 2019, 2020, and you can see it's really nicely done. It has that retro feel, and the cartridge has the same artwork as the box. And then it also includes the overlays for your controller, as well as a nice user manual, which has a lot of details. Sometimes you can glean from these, including hints and things like that. And it's a nice color manual. And then, as always, for the Atari 2600, they're always, John Champeau and the team, Nathan Strum, all the designers, they always do a great job with the packaging for the games that Champ Games puts out. And this, to me, is by far the best of the 3. The graphics really stand out on the artwork, and it's just beautifully done. And again, this is not really comparing apples to apples with the Commodore 64 version, because that's the original back in 1982. The cartridge also contains the same artwork and has a nice label, and then you also have the manual, which even trumps the Intellivision version. Nice, beautiful color manual. And then with the Champ Games version, it also has the poster. So you have this beautiful poster, which really brings the artwork to life. So if you have wall space, this is great. You throw this up Wizard of Wor, and it really expresses what it's like to be in a dungeon, being one of the Wizards of Wor. And then finally, I wanted to discuss and show the Commodore 64 version. It's pretty basic. A lot of the packaging for the Commodore 64 looked just like this, with an image with the blue kind of the color, material color that they used for the Commodore 64, kind of the theme that they had, and a couple of screenshots on the back. I don't know for sure, but I do have this manual for Wizard of Wor. I assume this is the manual that this game came with, because when I purchased this box, I did not have the game with it. And the cartridge, unfortunately, they don't have the image on the cartridge, which would be a nice effect, would be nice. I know some people have gone out and printed out artwork so that you could stick stickers on your Intellivision cartridges, but anyway, that is the cartridge for the Commodore 64 version. Alright, first up I'm going to hook up the Intellivision Wizard of Wor. So we're going to plug the cartridge into the Intellivoice. Then we're going to plug the Intellivoice into the Intellivision. cable's not in the way. It's important to note that the Intellivision, I'm using the coax right here. And on the TV, I'm plugging directly into the coax port here in the back. So I'm using coax back here, and one of these nifty little kind of coax to, I don't know what you call these little coax plugs. That's what I'm calling them. It's almost like going coax to RCA video. So you want to screw that in. So it's a fairly simple setup. And then we'll turn the TV on. And then turn on. I'll see if I can't change the lighting. Of course, you can't play without your overlays. We'll zoom that in and let's get a little quick game in. Oh, it's hard to see your bullet. Oh, there, I guess you can see it. Ah. So I don't know if you notice when they're talking, it's hard to make out what he's saying. A little bit difficult. I'm gonna turn it up a little.
Remember, I am the wizard of you.
I have no idea what he just said.
You both look like and so forth. For global warrior. You are made of and so forth.
So I just adjusted the volume of the Intellivision to make it a little louder.
If you fly any farther, you meet my doom.
Damn, I'm getting lucky.
Watch the radar for your.
I couldn't make that out. Oh, and there it goes.
The Wizard of Wor haunts you.
The Wizard of Wor haunts you. I got that one. Got that one.
I know you need the Wizard of Wor.
Something I am the Wizard of Wor. Anyhow, that is the Intellivision version.
I know you need the Wizard of Wor.
I am the Wizard of Wor. That's all I can make out. Let's move on to the
I am
Atari.
out of spite.
No, Atari, Wizard. We're going to Atari now. Alright, turning it off. Alright, now I have the Atari 2600 hooked up, and I have the Atarivox plugged into the right joystick port, and then plugged into the Atarivox. I have this little adapter which takes this headphone jack and converts it to RCA, and I use that to plug in directly to the Atarivox. Now, Albert on Atari Age recommended using this JIBR/R RCA combiner, and what it does is it takes inputs from two sources, so you could have an input here on the left and then an input on the right, and then it outputs it here. And so you do need a special cable for that. It doesn't come with it, which will then output it in an RCA cable, so you could take that output and then plug that into your television. I have this on the right is plugged directly into the Atarivox, and I have the output on my modded Atari, which are RCA jacks. I have the output of these two go into this combiner, and then I plug the output of this into the television. In order to have it all in one source on the TV, you alternately could just have a small set of speakers plugged directly into your Atarivox and listen to all the taunts from Wizard of Wor that way, or any game that has sound or speech synthesis. So let's plug it all up and play a game here on Wizard of Wor Arcade by John Champeau. I'm going to dim the lights a little. I also have my Hyperkin Trooper joystick. I'm playing with it plugged into the left joystick port. Right off the bat. Take care of you myself, ha ha ha. Notice some of the letters or the words that it plays, it doesn't look clear. It doesn't look like you can read. It's in the background, or it's like opaque, too much opaqueness. I'll show you. there. It says get ready. You can barely see it. I think it's easier to understand than the Intellivision version, but it's fewer phrases. I think I have 5 lives. Seriously. This gets hard. Woo. My name is something warrior. Oh, I think that's good. Wizard of Wor ends you. And it could be that that text there was difficult to read. It might be because of my mod. I'm not using the stock 2600. And you'll notice that it's saving my score. You can see the Atarivox saves your high score, so I have one that's previously on the 5th position. So that's the beautiful part of having that Atarivox, is that it has that 32K of memory that can save your scores. Don't boss me around, Wizard. Alright, I'm turning off 2600 now. And we'll go to the Commodore 64 version. Initially, when I hooked up the Commodore 64, I continued to use that audio combiner box, the same box that I was using on the 2600, and the audio in that configuration for the speech synthesis is just too low. So in a few moments here, I will switch it out to a different method. So I have the volume all the way up just in order to hear it, and I'm using the combiner. But I think there's a better way where I can get better output, and that's to hook this up. The output of the audio from the Commodore goes into the input on the Magic Voice, and then you take the output from the Magic Voice, throw it to the input of the TV. I'm going to try that, and I think it's going to come out sounding better than using the combiner I was using with the Atari. Alright, let's play the Commodore 64 version. Straight off the bat, sounds pretty good.
War and war become invisible. If you destroy my baby, I'll haunt you in the heaven.
Sound like I said, if you destroy my baby, I'll haunt you in heaven. Or I'll hunt you in heaven, ha ha ha.
Now you get a heavyweight.
Now you get a heavyweight, ha ha ha. Hard to understand a little bit, but easier to understand than Intellivision, I think. Should have had a seizure warning, I guess.
Keep going and you will find me. Your phone will lying in the Wizard of Wor. Ha 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 ha. Now you get that anyway. Ha 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 ha. Lying in the Wizard of Wor. Ha 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 ha. You'll get the arena. Ha 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 ha.
Bonus player.
If you destroy my baby, I'll pop you in the oven. Ha 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 ha. Now you get that anyway. Ha 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 ha.
Come on, baby. Yeah, right there. If you get too powerful, if you get too powerful, I'll take care of you myself. Ha ha ha. Ah, right there, died.
You can start a new, but for now you're through. Ha 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 ha.
So here it sets your high score. You don't get to put your name in like you do on the 2600 version.
You'll never leave Wor alive. Ha ha ha.
Continues to taunt you after the game's over.
Your Facebook is untied. Ha 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 ha.
I'll turn it up so you can hear better.
Your bones will lie in the dungeons of Wor. Ha 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 ha. You'll never leave Wor alive. Ha 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 ha. Find me that Wizard of Wor.
Now
Your bones will lie in the dungeons of Wor. Ha ha ha.
I'm gonna turn it off, and look what he says right when you turn it on.
You'll never leave Wor alive. Ha ha ha.
You'll never be more alive. Ha ha ha.
Find me that Wizard of Wor. Warlord, be forewarned, you approach the pit. You'll get the arena. Ha 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 ha.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it off.
Are getting hungry.
Oh, that's the one I haven't heard. My guests are getting
Warlord,
hungry.
be forewarned, you approach the pit. Now you get the heavyweight. Ha 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 ha.
Okay, I'm gonna turn that off, and we'll turn the lights on. So now that is all three versions of Wizard of Wor. This is the final. This is the Commodore 64 version with the Magic voice. It has so much potential. It's kind of disappointing that that they didn't make more games for it. Unplug it from the. It takes quite a bit of effort to get it out of there. But you can see what I do have my audio cables plugged in. And I do have the cartridge plugged in. Just to give a quick overview between the three games, I think the best audio, actually, I give it to Wizard of Wor Arcade for the Atari. I think it had the best audio. As far as this best speech synthesis came out of this one. I could understand it the most clear. The worst was the Intellivision version, but the gameplay on the television is pretty fun, so it gets a pass for that. As far as the overall sound effects and everything, I think the Commodore 64 version takes the award for that. I think it has the best sound effects by far. The speech is right there in the middle. It's in between, probably right there in the middle. You can understand some of the phrases, just not all of them. I find all of these games are really fun to play. I had a fun time playing the Atari 2600 by John Champeau. It was great remake. Every single version that I've played of these three, they all have some bugs where sometimes you can go through the enemy, and I think it's to be expected in some cases, but I've seen that happen on all three versions, not necessarily on my recording on here. So out of these three games, I'm most impressed with the Commodore 64 version because it was written back in the 80s and it's all vintage, including the magic voice in order to get the speech synthesis working. And these are modern remakes, so these kind of go hand in hand. If I had to tip my hat to one and the other right now, I prefer the Intellivision version, but both are really great games. And I believe you can purchase both of these games are still available. You can buy this on Champ Games. I think you can get the Intellivision version still, but they're modern remakes from 2019, 2020. And anyway, that is my video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and thank you for watching. It's not lost on me that there are huge hardware differences between these various versions, so I will be focusing mostly on the software side. In this segment, I am doing a recap of the feature summaries of the three versions of Wizard of Wor I have been discussing in this video. The award for Best Packaging goes to Wizard of Wor Arcade for the Atari 2600. In my opinion, it has the best artwork, and I love the glossiness of the box and manual. And the award for the most feature-packed version that I've reviewed today is the Atari version, Wizard of Wor Arcade. This is by far the most configurable. John Champeau always puts great thought and detail into all the various game options, including all the different types of controllers that you can use. Wizard of Wor Arcade also has 3 skill levels: Novice, Standard, and Advanced. It supports difficulty settings, and thanks to Atarivox Plus support, it also saves your high scores and remembers your game settings. And the next award is for Best Speech Synthesis. This one also goes to the Atari, and I judged this based on my ability to understand the phrases that were being spewed out by the device. I found the Atari Wizard of Wor Arcade version to be the most articulate. Moving on to the Best Sound Effects Arcade Quality. By far, this one was not close. It was the Commodore 64. Especially considering the game was released in the early 80s. It is really impressive, but it's also, maybe it's not surprising because the Commodore 64 has those SID chips, and so it has a leg up on the competition on that one. Moving on to the next award, the version that was the easiest to set up, without a doubt, was the Intellivision, because you don't have to worry about those dangling audio cables and where to plug them in to get the best volume for the speech synthesis. And then along that same vein, the version that has the easiest to adjust the speech volume to me is also the Intellivision, since it is built right into the Intellivoice unit, which makes it really easy to adjust the volume of the speech synthesis. The award for Computer Controls Player 2 goes to Atari and Intellivision, because in both versions of Wizard of Wor on those two consoles, the games can be configured where you play as player 1 and the computer plays as the CPU as player 2. Next, the award for Maze Editor Included goes to the Atari, since Wizard of Wor Arcade is the only version out of these three which have a maze editor built in. The next award is for the most gameplay bugs, and that award also goes to the Atari Wizard of Wor Arcade, since in my testing I encountered the most bugs with this version during gameplay. Nothing showstopper, but enough to distract me from the gameplay. And then finally, the most important award of them all, the game that was the most fun to play in my opinion, It actually is a tie, which seems like a cop-out, but it goes to the Commodore 64 version and the Intellivision, and it's for two different reasons. The Intellivision version is just really fun to play, but the sound effects are so vastly improved and closely mirror the arcade version so much that it elevates the Commodore 64 version. So if I'm looking for that type of an experience, the arcade sound effects and visuals, then the Commodore 64 wins. If I'm looking strictly at the gameplay, it's almost a tie between the two. So I give that award to both Intellivision and Commodore 64.